Now, we're in a debt crisis, aren't we? Perhaps facing a double-dip recession. That phrase is bandied about without explanation, isn't it? It's apparently a recession followed by a short-lived recovery, followed by another recession. But are we really in such a crisis that one of the richest nations in the world, Britain, is about to embark on a round of savage cuts to welfare and social services? Joining me now by Skype is Professor Greg Philo of Glasgow University, who has a plan to solve the UK's economic crisis at a stroke. And not just the UK's, because this plan is exportable. Professor, welcome to The Real Deal. Tell me the secret.
Well, hello. There are two things going on in Britain at the moment. We have a new government which is saying that the last government spent much too much and on things like hospitals, schools or whatever, and the public sector and roads or whatever, and that they are now going to cut back on all this spending. Now, some economists are saying that this will produce a terrible depression. At the same time, when I looked up the figures for wealth in Britain, it was, as you just said, I mean, Britain is the sixth richest country in the world. It has private wealth of about £9,000 billion. Private wealth. It's not corporate wealth. It's wealth owned by individuals. And the bulk of that is in the top sort of 10, 20% of the population. So the top 10%, that's the richest 6 million people in Britain, have wealth of about £4,000 billion, if you can get your head around that. Now, the point I made simply was that if you took 1/5 of that wealth, that would pay off the entire national debt. I mean, the complete national debt. You could simply get rid of that debt by a single tax of 1/5 of that wealth of the top 10% of the population. And they wouldn't actually have to pay the wealth straight away. They could do it as a sort of death duty, or they could pay a low rate of interest on it. The point is, if they took liability for the debt, then the debt would move off the government books and the government would no longer have any debt. And that would mean they could then use the tax that was coming in to invest where it needed to go, in universities, new technology, new green technologies, new infrastructure. And most of all, you wouldn't have this terrible program of cuts, which is likely to produce unemployment and serious economic depression.
Sounds like Bolshevism to me, Professor. What sort of reception has this had in the political circles now ruling us?
Well, the political circles won't discuss it. What's interesting is that the bulk of the population would want it. We took this plan, explained it very carefully, did a national opinion poll of over 2,000 people. You've got YouGov, the polling organisation, to do it for us. And they found that 74% of the population would support this plan, and which is far higher than anything else that's been on offer. But the point is, a plan like that is not offered. People are simply not told about it. And it's terribly difficult in Britain to even get ideas like this discussed. There's no discussion in this country of how much wealth there is or who owns the wealth. If in Britain the media discuss wealth, they might talk about a few people, talk about the richest 1,000, or they'll talk about David Beckham or something like that. So the population get the idea that there's just a small number of very rich people. But actually there's about 6 million people who have, on average, a household wealth of about £4 million. And as I said, simply a fifth of that, 20% of that, would clear the entire national debt of Britain. But if you look at the other end of society, the bottom 50%, the bottom half of Britain, has only got 9% of the wealth. I mean, virtually nothing. And the bottom 10% have less than nothing. They have what's called negative wealth. They have only debts. Now,
and yet those are the very people who are going to pay for this crisis, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Through increases in VAT, which disproportionately affects the poor, and through all the cuts in what effectively are the social wage. I mean, the government has said it's not going to attack the health service, but many people are saying, well, the effect of these cuts is that it will damage that, and that of course roads, schools, the justice system, a whole range of areas are going to be cut. Even the school meals service is being threatened now.
What do you think the likely reaction of the official opposition would be to your plan, Professor? The New Labour famously described its attitude as being seriously relaxed to the filthy rich. Is that going to change with a new leadership, do you think?
I think what Peter Mandelson actually said was he was relaxed about wealth as long as people paid their taxes. I think that's what he said. Well, what I'm suggesting is they pay a bit more taxes.
Well, it's a bit more than a bit more, isn't it?
We won't have the problem.
Yeah, it's a bit more than a bit more. It's 20% of their wealth of 4 million, which is...
Interesting, though, that when we did the poll on this, that the wealthiest groups were more in favour of it, I mean, slightly more in favour than the poorest groups. And I asked some very wealthy people that I knew, why was that? Why would rich people want a tax like this? And I got two answers. One was that the issue of stability, that they are very concerned about the effect of the stock market on social disorder, of social disorder on the stock market. So the issue of stability was important. And the other one which was given to me was that if the government stabilised its finances in this way, then the effect on the stock market would be that it would go through the roof, that the stock market in the long run would be stabilised and would increase in value. And they said we would all get our 20% back anyway.
Well, that's fascinating, I must say. Tell me, where does the campaign go from here, Greg? It's obviously got my vote. How do we get everyone else's vote?
Well, I wrote an article in The Guardian laying it out. We had a huge response to this. I mean, there were about 600 letters written in to The Guardian immediately within the first 24 hours about it. We've been inundated with mail and people writing to us in Glasgow University. If people want to see the details of it, they can go to the Glasgow Media Group website. It's simply Google Glasgow Media Group. And all the details there are in it, and you can read the actual article. But we will now start to discuss this exactly with politicians, with trade union leaders, with rank and file groups, and just try to push this idea onto the political agenda, because it really would solve the crisis that not only Britain but Europe and other countries are actually in. It is simply an adjustment of the ownership of wealth towards paying for the public sector in a clearer and a much better way, which stops the economic depression. It's a very sensible policy. I mean, you said it's like Bolshevism, but actually it really is a sort of move more towards a kind of Swedish model where you have less of a division of wealth and a higher public sector, which guarantees you employment and growth and technological development and very good investment in the areas where you want it to go.
Have you got a snappy name for the tax?
Privatise the national debt.
Well, that's quite good, I must say, Professor. Privatise the national debt. So give me again, Glasgow Media Group is what people Google.
Glasgow Media Group,
There
yes.
They can read your Guardian article. And any tips to them as to what to do about it, how they can lobby for it?
Yes, exactly. We'll put all that up.
Brilliant. Professor Greg Philo from Glasgow University, thanks very much indeed. Keep us updated on the progress, and we'll talk again. Thank you very much indeed.